Today, I'd like to continue our journey through the book of Joshua. We've been looking at this uh, pilgrimage from the desert to the promised land, and now Joshua has led the people into the promised land. And what they're really trying to do at this point is establish the different lands that they can conquer and be part of, and really get settled here in the promised land. And it's going to be no easy task because there are other people, other tribes that are in the land that were there first. And so this back and forth is occurring with different battles and who's going to conquer who and what land they're going to get. So in chapter 16 of the book of Joshua, we see that the different tribes, the 12 tribes, are now going to establish which land is theirs. We start off, first of all, with the tribe of Joseph because, of course, Joseph had that special relationship with Jacob. He was the beloved son, so naturally we start with Joseph. And with Joseph, you have the two kind of half tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph. So they are going to be discussed as to where they're going to live. And the Canaanites who were there, we might kind of get a little naive picture here of, well, here come the Israelites, there go the Canaanites. Doesn't really happen that way. The Canaanites resist, stay around, they're part of the scene. In some ways, they're not going to go anywhere. There are different battles that we've seen, of course, in the book of Joshua, and Joshua has been victorious in some of them. But as always, there's these other situations that develop, and there aren't any battles, and the Canaanites are living there, and it's kind of a live and let live. Well, that's your land, this is my land type of situation. Now, for example, in chapter 16, we learn that the Canaanites who were living in Gezer were not driven out. But later on, they become impressed as laborers. So what happens is there's a coexistence, they live together, and eventually these Canaanites become laborers for the Israelites. In chapter 17, then, we get into the land of the tribe of Manasseh, the other son of Joseph, and that's outlined. And a portion of that land is going to be given to the daughters of Zelophehad, because Zelophehad, unfortunately, he had no sons, he only had daughters, and Moses had made an allowance for this. We saw this in the book of Numbers, that Moses had said, well, in this situation, there are no sons. Zelophehad is entitled, really, to this land, so it's going to pass through his daughters. So we have a victory for the women, kind of a minor victory because the men are dominating, but a victory nonetheless that respects the rights of women. And unfortunately, we would like to see a little bit more respect and equality, but there is this sense that the women at least are respected at that point. Some of the cities in the area could not be conquered. And so when the Israelites got stronger, when they developed more forces, when they had more wealth, they impressed the Canaanites as laborers. And so the Canaanites would work for them. And of course, not all of the Canaanites. Some of the Canaanites were wealthy and had their own farms and had their own families, of course, and grew. So they were kind of coexisting with the Israelites. It wasn't a complete conquest where all these Canaanites are driven out and the Israelites take the land completely. And it's not a sense of all of the Canaanites becoming laborers. Certainly that did not happen. At this point, we learn that the descendants of Joseph needed more land because they were so numerous. So they were given the mountainous region, and they were told that they could clear out the forests, and they had to, in that area where the forests were, in the mountainous area, and also on the plain of Esdraelon, they had to overcome the Canaanites because it's mentioned that the Canaanites at this point had iron chariots. So the Canaanites were pretty sophisticated, pretty well equipped, if they had these iron chariots. It wasn't just the wooden chariots. So they were making superior weapons. So naturally, wisdom was factored into the equation here, and you're not going to go against an enemy that's superior. You're going to kind of work around them in some ways and maybe get different land. And then when you get stronger, when you get in a better position, then you can press your case a little bit more for better land. Chapter 18, the Israelites gather at Shiloh to celebrate the conquest and to set up a meeting tent. So Shiloh becomes one of those areas that becomes a sacred area for the Israelites, an area where they're going to be celebrating certain sacrifices and prayer rituals. And naturally, they've been successful in many battles, so they come together and they celebrate that success. How do they celebrate it? They celebrate it in prayer. They celebrate it at the meeting tent. Joshua had representatives then from the 7 tribes that had not received their portion of land, and he asked them to take a survey of the land and divide it into 7 sections. Naturally, a very good approach. Take that survey and you can find out, what sections we can give to which tribes. Joshua then cast lots to give each tribe a section of the land. And the land for the tribe of Benjamin is described, and it included 14 cities. In chapter 19, the lands then are described for Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, and Dan, and all their boundaries are described as to what was the eastern part, the western, north, and south. So there's a sense of that is their land. Simeon's land was within that of the Judaites. So the thought was that the tribe of Simeon wasn't that numerous, and so that tribe was absorbed into the tribe of Judah, which became a very strong and powerful tribe, and certainly was the tribe of David, was the ruling tribe in the southern kingdom. Zebulun had 12 cities, and it's interesting, one of those cities was the city of Bethlehem, where, of course, later on Jesus would be born. Issachar had 16 cities, Asher had 22 cities, very impressive, and Naphtali had 19 cities. Dan's land was really too small, and they attacked Leshem. They renamed that city Dan, and they took more land to the north because the land they were initially given was near the coast, and the Philistines really controlled that area, so they went up north. After all the tribes had received their lands, Joshua got his own city in the mountain region of Ephraim, so it became his special place. It's also interesting that Joshua, when he was dividing the land, was helped by Eleazar the priest. So there was a kind of a religious component to this as well. So at this point now, the different tribes are situated in the land. There's going to be, though, back and forth even after this time as to other lands that they acquire. But you get a general outline of where the lands were and where the different tribes were located at this point as we progress through the book of Joshua.